Ben Thompson at Stratechery, highly recommend that you subscribe. He kicks off with a quote from Bloomberg. He says, XAI showed off the updated GROK 3 model. They call it the smartest AI on Earth. Across math, science, and coding benchmarks, GROK 3 beats Google Gemini, DeepSeek V3, Anthropic Claude, and GPT's 4o. They said they announced this during a live stream Monday. GROK 3 has more than 10 times the compute power of its predecessor and completed pre-training in early January. Musk said at the presentation alongside 3 XAI engineers, "We're continually improving the models every day. It's literally within 24 hours you'll see improvements." And that's true. Like they are really rolling out stuff very, very, very quickly. They also introduced a smart search engine, which I tested. And interestingly, you don't need to click a button to trigger it. It's just like if it thinks that you want some deep research, it just goes and does it. Yeah. It's called Deep Search. It's a reasoning chatbot that expresses its process of understanding a query and how it plans its response. And we'll take you through one of the results from GROK 3's Deep Search product. And then they also intend to release a voice-based chatbot as soon as possible. So Ben Thompson writes, GROK 3 appears to be one of, if not the best performing base model in the world. It is topping the usual benchmarks, but not if you include O3, which is interesting. That was not in the bar charts, which we'll get to. Yeah. And tops all categories, the highest ever score in LM Arena. Yeah.
Obviously, we're XAI fans, X fans here, GROK fans, but the sort of selective positioning of new models against models like definitely needs to be called out because people just sort of decide, all right, who are we going to sort of compare ourselves to in this very moment? Yeah, because everybody just wants to show,
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like there's so many different vectors because O3 can be very compute intensive. Then there's O3 mini, then there's O3 mini high. And so, there's this big like value trade-off between, if you let the LLM reason for hours and you spend $2,000 per query, you can get remarkable results. But then is that really a fair benchmark against something that costs $1 to inference or 10 cents? And so all of a sudden you need to plot these on like an X and Y graph. And then eventually you need to plot them on some sort of like, unintelligible tensor graph or something. Anyway, let's go to Andrej Karpathy, the absolute dog, who is not a fair observer because he's worked with Elon, but he's also worked at OpenAI. So maybe he's a little bit more fair than most people think. I really enjoy his analysis. He says, the impression overall I got here is that this is somewhere around O1 Pro capability and ahead of DeepSeek R1, though of course we need actual real evaluations to look at. The impression I get of Deep Search is that it's approximately around Perplexity's deep research offering, which is great, but not at the level of OpenAI's recently released Deep Research, which still feels more thorough and reliable. And I found that Deep Research is just better at spitting out 5,000 words. Most of the other products spit out 1,000 words. And so you just get more out of Deep Research.
Which is what you want from deep research.
Usually,
right?
Usually.
You're not looking for, perfectly summarized, handful of paragraphs.
Exactly.
It's like the entire point is to let you kind of figure out what's important about what they
Karpathy goes on. He says, as far as a quick vibe check over 2 hours this morning, GROK 3 plus thinking feels somewhere around the state-of-the-art territory of OpenAI's strongest models, O1 Pro for $200 a month, and slightly better than DeepSeek R1 and Gemini 2.0 flash thinking, which is quite incredible considering that the team started from scratch 1 year ago. This timescale to state-of-the-art territory is unprecedented, and that is undeniable. This gets at the first GROK 3 takeaway. It's simultaneously surprising and not surprising. Start with the latter. XAI famously built a 100,000 GPU cluster in Memphis and now has 200,000 GPUs and used 20,000 of them to train GROK 3. And so they're still building the larger cluster. So even though you'll see a lot of people posting on the timeline, GROK 3, 100,000 GPUs, that's not accurate. They only use 20,000 for this, but it's still impressive.
Yeah, and just to highlight again, this is the largest cluster ever. The 20,000 GPUs.
That's not true. The 100,000 is the largest ever. I believe.
So he's saying the largest ever for XAI or the largest ever for any foundation model?
I don't know. I asked both ChatGPT and GROK to pull this. GROK says GPT-4 used 25K GPUs, while GROK 3 used 20,000 GPUs. Now ChatGPT says that GPT-4 was just thousands, 20K GPUs, A100s. And
so it seems like around 25K has been the top to date.
It's honestly unclear from these.
But clearly Elon knows that he's just willing to sprint towards these big numbers as fast as humanly possible.
100%. And so, and sure, it resulted in a top tier model. That's not surprising given it is what scaling laws predicted, but it is comforting as there was a question as to whether scaling laws had hit a wall. And people were saying this during the DeepSeek kind of fiasco. What is surprising is that xAI is only 19 months old. The company has gone from incorporation to the largest GPU cluster in the world to arguably the best model in less time than it has taken OpenAI to go from GPT-4 to GPT-5, albeit with substantial updates along the way, including the big 4.0 update just this past weekend. It's both a testament to Elon Musk and his team, Jess Jensen, CEO of NVIDIA, Jensen Huang.
So to me, this tells that our read on the Elon bid, which was only last week, it feels like a month ago at this point.
Yeah.
But Elon bidding $100 billion to buy some, not entirely known amount of OpenAI means that he believes he either was purely doing that out of spite to toss like a wrench into that process, or he believes that the product layer is what actually matters because he's able to achieve incredible performance purely at the model layer. But even as Karpathy's saying, the product layer is not there yet, and certainly GROK has nowhere near the real consumer usage that OpenAI does.
Yeah. It's interesting. So he goes into competitive implications. He says, I did get access to GROK 3, but not the thinking and search models. I actually don't know if I have access to the thinking and search models. It's unclear to me from a product perspective. And he has to say that he finds himself using GROK 2 quite a bit, almost entirely via its integration into the X app. It turns out being plugged into a pre-existing distribution channel is very useful. Yeah. And this is a crazy bull case for Elon buying X.
But the challenge is that X is a very specific type of audience that is not necessarily reflective of, certainly not the LinkedIn audience.
Sure.
Like you could argue that OpenAI should go do a deal with LinkedIn and say like, make us your default LLM and just distribute us to like the normie masses because like long-term it's going to be more important to be there. Yeah.
Yeah. He also says, I also never use it anywhere else. For me, product matters and ChatGPT remains my product of choice. I feel the exact same way. I'm also curious to what extent ChatGPT deep research's advantage over other competitors like Google, Perplexity, and now xAI are due simply to O3 still being the best model versus OpenAI spending more time crafting a better tool. Regardless, the impetus for OpenAI to focus on being a consumer tech company is as strong as ever. OpenAI is the only AI lab to have organically built its own distribution channel, and they really, really need to get an advertising product out the door to ensure they are serving free customers the best possible models, which makes perfect sense. This also explains why
that has to be pending, this
I'm
quarter,
sure they're building
this quarter
it right now.
potential.
Yeah. And there's just a question of, do they use Microsoft as the partner there? I believe Netflix was considering that as well, because Microsoft has a really big ad network from LinkedIn and from Bing. Even though you don't think of them as a big advertising company, they built all the algorithms and all the structure and all the inventory. And so
certainly not going to be Meta.
Yeah. And so this also explains why OpenAI is tying up with Oracle and SoftBank and trying to become a for-profit. xAI raised $6 billion last November and actually owns its GPUs. Musk also said on the live stream that xAI is building out a 1 million GPU cluster. Let's go. Size gone for the 1 million cluster. Boom. Let's get that in the handier spot.
Get this more dialed in. We need a button to hit on the set that just raises the raises the gong.
It's hilarious. And then, of course, he ties it to Ilya Sutskever in Bloomberg is raising more than $1 billion for his startup at a valuation of over $30 billion. We'll talk about this later in the show. Vaulting the nascent venture into the ranks of the world's most valuable private technology companies. Green Oaks is in. They're putting in $500 million, said the person who asked not to be identified. Green Oaks is also an investor in AI companies Scale and Databricks. The round marks a significant valuation from the $5 billion that Sutskever's company was worth before. First off, a disclaimer. Daniel Gross, a frequent Stratechery interview guest, is the CEO of SSI.
I never realized.
I didn't know that.
Is that breaking? Are we scooping? Are we scooping Ben Scoop
We gotta
right now?
cool with the scoops. It's too much. People get confused. No, I think this was actually like publicized like very early on.
Interesting.
That Ilya wanted to be the technical lead more than anything else.
That's cool.
But that's very cool.
Because DG, he's going. He seems like from everything I've seen, just extremely, extremely motivated to win and be in the most important places constantly. Right. Yeah. It's funny. He also had an accelerator.
Yeah.
Sam had an accelerator, small accelerator called Y Combinator.
Mm-hmm.
So the accelerator to foundation model pipeline is very real.
The other path, the counterfactual, the path not traveled here. Daniel Gross sold a company, Apple, in AI, got acquired, should have taken over the CEO role.
Yeah.
This is something we advocate here on the show. If you get your company acqui-hired, start asking the CEO, hey, what's the successsion plan?
Yeah.
How can I get
hang out outside of the board meetings?
Yeah.
Try to flag people down. It'll only take 4 quarters to get a little time with like the key players, and then from there, just start. It's
such an underrated strategy right now. I think like there's massive value in being a founder and actually going in and
going for the
around,
top job.
Going for the top job. It sounds too ambitious to be true, but I think someone will eventually do it, and we'll all be like, wow. Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah, a lot of founders end up getting acqui-hired and then are not super happy with the leadership at the company.
Yeah, and then there's
just become the leadership.
Exactly, become the leadership instead of. And it sounds like a joke, but it's not. It's actually a better path than just like resting, investing, and then you're like, oh, what do I want to do next? I'll have to do the same company or like become a VC.
Start over,
kind of lost
from zero.
Instead of like, wait, I just got acquired by a company that does the same thing that I was doing, but they have 1,000 times more resources. Yeah. The only problem here is that I'm not in charge. What if I was in charge? Yeah. Solve that problem. Yeah. Anyway. That's my little stump speech. And so they have pledged, this is wild about SSI. So they have pledged not to release a product until it has achieved safe superintelligence. So they're going to raise so much money. Well, XAI explains why. It is absolutely viable to have started late, provided you have the funds, catch up quickly, and of course, SSI's talent speaks for itself. SSI is also, I would imagine, a big NVIDIA customer. Again, I don't know that to be true, but what else might the money be going towards? Which brings this conversation back to chips. On one hand, chips remain the gating factor to the easiest route to a frontier model. On the other hand, this is why DeepSeek matters. They're not the only route to something that is at least competitive. The debate on the value of an attempted export ban remains an open one. Anyway, fantastic article.
Absolutely wild.
Ben,
I totally respect SSI saying we're not going to ship until we've achieved our goal, which is like the kind of approach you can only really take if you're Ilya and like Daniel Gross, where you're basically saying, yes, we're going to need to raise billions of dollars. You're going to just have to trust us that we're going to, and just like bet on us that we're going to deliver that. One of the things that every foundation, like the foundation model wars right now, which will be studied eventually because it's creating this sort of foundational technology that presumably our entire society will be dependent on at some point. It is so distracting for these companies and the teams and the investors when there's new models releasing every week. And you can imagine everybody at Anthropic last night was watching the GROK demo live, not working. Everybody at OpenAI was doing the same thing, right? So it's just wildly distracting to constantly be forced to ship and ship and ship when you can tell that they're able to make incredible progress internally without even getting user feedback, right? They're basically Elon's basically saying, hey, I just need another $20 billion and I'm going to make a much better model. Like, sure, we'll make it available through the XAI X integration. But
Elon wants to solve the Riemann hypothesis. He is the customer, and he has his eval. And once it solves the Riemann hypothesis, he'll be happy. And that's kind of it, which is fascinating. I think another hot take that we were discussing earlier was there's this big push around like the model layer is commoditizing. And people say that as like a bear case. But I was wondering if you flip it around, like people make tons of money in commodities all the time, right? Like oil, big oil. Like oil is a commodity.
Still worth producing oil.
It's hugely valuable. There were massive companies built on it. There were small companies that just did little exploration and just had a little plot of land,
or
built a little track.
Actual infrastructure, technology providers.
And so I wonder if there's a world where, intelligence is so valuable and LLMs and AI is so valuable that even if you're like the 6th best model, you can still sell the intelligence if it's at the frontier level to the market at a
Yeah.
market clearing price that still generates
Yeah.
profit above what the NVIDIA GPUs cost.
Yep.
And you still reap the reward, and the $30 billion valuation is completely justified in the same sense that, hey, yeah, if you're like, hey, I got a plot of land in Texas that I'm going to pull some oil out of. Yeah. You don't have a monopoly on all of oil, but you still made money.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if that's
and
how
the
it'll play out.
If LLMs replace a lot of work broadly, knowledge work specifically, it's easy to say, hey, these are $1 trillion markets that we're playing in. It makes total sense that there's 5 to 10 companies that are going to raise billions of dollars to go after that, right? Because the prize is so great, potential prize is so great that Ilya raising at 30, and Daniel Gross raising at 30 billion post is actually, maybe it just ends up looking like a great investment of like, how do you potentially get a 50x on a multi-billion-dollar check? Like maybe that's how
it
you do
is so crazy when you think about it that way. Like when you think about like crypto, it's like a big new technology. A lot of people are into it. It's just like a cool thing. And the market cap of all the crypto combined is around $1 trillion. Social networking, also like very valuable, cool new technology. Market cap around $1 trillion. Phones, cool new technology. Market cap around $1 trillion. Electric cars, cool new technology. Market cap around $1 trillion. Operating systems, Microsoft around $1 trillion. Cloud computing, there's around $1 trillion of value. And so it's like, in what world does AI and LLMs not wind up being around $1 trillion of value? I get that like it could go any direction, and like how you slice that up, it could be very equal. It could be one winner take all. And hey, people are going to have their bull case for X or bull case for or OpenAI, Anthropic, whoever. But it just feels like the stakes are definitely 1 trillion, right? If we look out in the future, even if we're not being like super intelligence pilled, and we're just thinking about like this is a new technology and it will be a consumer market or an enterprise market or any of them. Like, will there be an opportunity to make a bunch of money? Probably. So anyway, let's move on to Yaxine. He's working for Elon over at X, a good friend of the show. He's become a bit of an OpenAI hater. But let's hear him out and see.
We got some poster on poster violence here because this is clearly a Rune caricature or the same exact character, and dancing around the data center.
And so he's arguing that there's no moat with this. He says moats are Silicon Valley headcanon, wishful thinking. They need it to exist. They make you believe that you're doing the thing that would be impossible for others, all to justify the fundraise. When they say moat, what they're saying is proprietary monopoly. I'm here to tell you that the monopoly is a myth. The proprietary monopoly simply does not exist. OpenAI could open source all of their models and it wouldn't really harm their business existence. It would only harm their ability to fundraise. Everyone should take Peter Thiel more seriously. Just be different.
I mean, what a poster. I mean, he's layering on a bunch of things that people could potentially disagree with in the first few paragraphs. Which positions him well to then extrapolate on all those ideas now that people are kind of riled up a little bit.
Totally. So he says, is capital a moat? In previous times, capital was a moat. But as technology progresses, everything becomes cheaper. Skill, labor are now being automated. Levels.io can command a few 10M valued companies, order of magnitude $10 million valued companies, spawning them every 3 months for fun. He doesn't need to raise. I like that.
We gotta put levels in the cage, by the way. He'd
crush it. He'd be out in a day. Especially with the latest code gen slop spitting out PHP server code. It's free. It's free. The software I produce for myself on a daily basis would have taken a team of engineers. Now it's 1 hour in between work and dinner. It's post-scarcity. It's unprecedented. We are at the point where the idea that capital as a moat is not being sold by the people who need the funds. Instead, the idea is being pushed by the people with the sad capital that has nowhere to go. What is the point of money when legions of engineers who actually just slow you down? When you really only need 8x H100 and 2 frogs to create outsized impact. Your real competitor is the end user writing their own software. I used to work at Auth0. We shipped login as a service. It sold itself. Many Seattle homes were paid off by sales commissions of Auth0 contracts. It wasn't Okta, it wasn't Ping One. Our biggest competitor was our customer themselves writing their own login page. We had to sell them on it not being a good way to spend their time. So he breaks down the serious AGI players. This is personal opinion. OpenAI, nah. Remember Yahoo? Okay, yeah, Xene, we know who you're pushing for here. The serious players, vertical robotics manufacturers, and Majuko shops. I don't know what that means. Majuko. DJI, Unitree, Tesla, Anduril, DeepSeek, Jane Street, Palantir, social media platforms, Meta, vertical AI companies, XAI, DeepSeek, Google. Are your ML researchers wearing knee pads and a sweaty tank top, plugging in Ethernet? If yes, you're going to make it. ETH Zurich, I will not elaborate. Distributed, decentralized AI. Bootstrap companies with a lot of freedom, people building novel devices. Interesting. What can't be easily replicated? Software used to cost money, and AI is just software. There is a limit on individual model intelligence that yields diminishing returns, and it is my belief that we will rapidly exhaust any room available. It is my belief that AGI will run on consumer hardware, and any proprietary models will only be run as convenience. What can't be easily replaced is knees on the ground, soldering irons, and the Majoko RL sauce. And godlike product managers yearning, invest accordingly. This is financial advice for billionaires.
This feels like it feels like basically 40 posts combined into one article.
Yeah.
No, but one thing that's interesting. So when we were talking earlier about intelligence being commodified, and some people saying, "Oh, it's not investable. It's a commodity. If it's a commodity, especially at these prices," you're saying, "Hey, commodities actually are very valuable. There's a ridiculous amount of demand for them." The hard part, what he's outlining here, is that everybody knows that there's a big market for oil. Like, you can see what the price is. If you can get a barrel of oil out of the ground, you can sell it at the sort of market clearing price for that grade of oil, right? There's oil that turns into jet fuel and whatever, but there's it's a commodity. It's sort of priced in the open market. There's fully a world where intelligence gets to that point too. And then the challenge is what Yassine is saying, which is here with AI, is what can't be easily replicated is knees on the ground, soldering irons, et cetera, et cetera. And so the same thing with oil. It's the challenge with getting oil out of the ground is you got to get oil out of the ground, right? You need dudes with trucks to go drill for oil, and then make sure the drill is running properly, make sure you have water, make sure you have power. The drill is breaking all the time, and so it doesn't seem like data centers will maybe be that at as much of a challenge to keep operational, but it's certainly not easy to operate these things highly efficiently, right?
Yeah, interesting. I don't know. Yeah, if it's a commodity, where is the most valuable part of the commodity? Is it the
producer? And this, the supplier producer.
Yeah, but is that energy? Is that NVIDIA, or is that the LLM, deliverer?
Right.
It's an open question. Anyway, let's move on to some reactions on the timeline, and then we'll give you a breakdown of GROK 3 versus OpenAI Deep Research. So, Creatine Cycle, who's been on the show before, says, sorry, Autismos, it's time to grow some arms and social skills. And Jordy chimes in and says, getting diced continues to be underpriced. And he says, printing this out and hanging it on my wall in Pack Heights. And he just shows the GROK 3 reasoning data. It beat O3 mini high.
Beta, reasoning beta.
Some people were upset about this. Rex, 2 slides later, says, they omitted O3 from the chart in the live stream for some reason, so I added the numbers for you. And then, but this was reasonable because O3 isn't public and those benchmarks can't be verified yet. So I think it's understandable that they didn't include it. But then again, GROK 3 with reasoning isn't publicly available, so people can't validate that eval. So there's a lot of questions over what counts for an eval that goes in the chart. But
I think they both have fair arguments there.
Yeah.
They're we can validate what our model does.
Yeah.
We cannot validate what you're doing because it's not available. So we know.
Yep.
We cooked.
Yeah. And so Sheil Monat gives a little context on the GROK Colossus. 200,000 GPUs in Memphis, Tennessee, built in 214 days. I think Semi-Analysis and Dylan Patel have done a deeper dive here that we'll have to dig into. There's some really fascinating things going on here. Sheil says, why Memphis? They found an old Electrolux factory, added trailers to add cooling, 1/4 of the cooling capacity of the US, and trailers for power generation. They used Tesla Megapacks to smooth out power fluctuations. The next training cluster will go from 1/4 gigawatt to 1.2 gigawatts using GB200s from NVIDIA. There's a fascinating thing that leaked because of Llama. When Meta open sourced Llama 3 or some piece of that, they had a line or like a function, a piece of code in the training data that basically said like what was it? It was like power plant not blow up. And so basically what it does is when you're training, you're doing all this complex math that's using a lot of electricity.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden there'll be like moments where you're maybe just like, okay, we're done doing the math. We're going to like save the model for a second.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden your power will just drop to zero.
Yeah.
And if the power like substation or the power plant is sending tons of electricity, and then all of a sudden it doesn't get any, it can blow up or something like that, or it can be bad. And so they built a special piece of code that basically just does random math.
Can you imagine the reason that got implemented?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like these engineers are just like,
it might blow up.
Just tapping away, vibe coding. And then they just get a call.
Hey,
and it's like, hey, like, what are you guys doing right
now? Yeah. I mean, it would be crazy if there was like a major power plant.
Yeah, and
explosion.
so just going back to the Colossus, the cluster in Memphis, this was always in many ways, I think we talked about this last year, the bull case for Elon building a foundation model company was that he has the boots on the ground experience to spin up heavy infrastructure manufacturing facilities, figuring out how to manufacture batteries at scale for Tesla in the United States. And so having the playbook and being able to pull talent from, a company like Tesla or SpaceX and say, hey, we need to build this data center in 214 days. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Like many people would say, even, linking this back to LA, people are not going to have their homes rebuilt for 4 years.
That's crazy.
They did this. They built the biggest, cluster ever in 214 days.
No, that's a great point.
Where they just found an old factory and said, we're just doing this right now.
Yeah.
And so that's
really Elon's edge here for sure.
Yeah. No, it is so part of the culture at Tesla. They're
making millions of Starlinks.
So the CTO
cars, rockets.
The CTO at Deterrence.
Yeah.
Was at Tesla specifically working on their battery cell engineering. And so he's just bringing that just crazy ethos around. His name's Henry, around speed.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing to witness.
That's awesome.
Let's
move on to Word Grammar. Word Grammar says, I'm feeling very similar to how I felt 6 months ago. OpenAI did something groundbreaking. Now 2 other labs have replicated it. Soon the rest will follow, making it a pretty undifferentiated market. We've talked about this a little bit. I mean, it's unclear, like, if OpenAI had not launched deep research and like the reasoning model, would DeepSeek have been able to come up with it? Like, is the idea valuable, or is it just or is everyone kind of on the same path? What do you think?
It's interesting. Because everybody's competing against many of the same benchmarks to show that they're competitive, they're all focusing on getting better at many of the same things. When what we really want, and which is why SSI is interesting, is they're basically saying we're not going to release anything publicly until it's what we want it to be. So we're not going to build based around these benchmarks. And so I actually think the competition is good and bad. It's like a double-edged sword, right? It's good in that it's sort of pushing the pace and everybody's motivated to rapidly improve these models. But at the same time, it's not so great because we're getting models that consistently just look more and more and more like each other. And consumers are not even going to be able to notice the difference. So they're just going to probably default to what they already use and love, or maybe you're using GROK in X, but not elsewhere.
Here's an interesting twist on that. So Paul Calcraft says, Elon posted an early GROK 3 screenshot saying he asked what GROK 3 thought of the information, and it said it's garbage. And then Paul Calcraft asked the same question, what's your opinion on the information? And it told him it's a solid outlet. And you know what's going on here. It's fine-tuning on the person who queries it their timeline. And so Grok 3, when Elon prompts it, it knows Elon doesn't like the information. Let's give him an answer that confirms what he believes. And it's the same thing for Paul Calcraft. And so this is going to raise a very interesting question where people will kind of be in like LLM echo chambers almost, where they're like, oh yeah, I asked the LLM and it told me that, microplastics aren't a big deal because I've been posting about that, or microplastics are the worst thing ever because I've been posting about that.
No, this is exactly what already happens on X broadly. The X echo chamber is so
super
real.
Yep.
Where you just sort of, for me, I'll see very like offhand, randomly somebody will have like a blue sky in their profile.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, I haven't seen that in a while.
Yeah.
But someone else is seeing that constantly.
Oh yeah.
And they're probably using blue sky.
Yeah,
they're like, oh yeah, everybody I love uses blue sky.
Yeah.
Right.
100%. It's very interesting, and what's going to happen here is that the mainstream media is going to do these tests where they go, what they did on like TikTok and Instagram, where they'd be like, I followed a bunch of Nazi content and then it gave me more Nazi content, and so it's like a Nazi algorithm. They'll probably do the same thing where they'll like go into these LLMs, talk to it for a really long time, essentially fine tune it on the idea that like they're crazy, and then it'll be like, it gave me crazy responses, and it's like, yeah, I get it. It probably shouldn't do that. But at the same time, like, you really like twisted its arm, and it's not doing that for most people. So I don't really have that much of a problem with it, as long as there's like some guidelines here and like it's directionally, like it doesn't automatically steer you towards some negative echo chamber. Anyway, Word Grammar has another banger post here.
On a roll.
Richard Sutton's Bitter Lesson died January 22. With DeepSeek, and it was born again on February 17th, less than a month. So this is, of course, about scaling laws and Rich Sutton's Bitter Lesson, which we'll get into. Of course, the idea that algorithms, while important, are not as important as scaling and compute power. And so scale is all you need. Let's go to another post from Liron Shapira. He says, people in 2022, Elon can't actually keep these servers online. Elon Now. The bonus tab in the app takes you to the highest benchmarked frontier model. And so, real narrative violation for everyone that said Elon wasn't going to be able to keep X or Twitter like online. He's like, not only doing that, but
the reason that it wasn't an issue is I don't have a memory of wanting to use Twitter and or X and not being able to. And I think I would remember that for my whole life. Right? It's such a daily habit. If you're going on there and just nothing was loading, he really mogged everybody that was calling him out on that.
Yeah, well, Andre Karpathy shared more evals because he got access to Grok 3. He says, on thinking, Grok clearly has an around state-of-the-art thinking model, the think button, and did great out of the box on my Settlers of Catan question, which is create a board game web page showing a hex grid, just like in the game Settlers of Catan. Each hex grid is numbered 1 to n, where n is the total number of hex tiles. Make it generic so one can change the number of rings using a slider. For example, Catan, the radius is 3 hexes. Single HTML page, please. Pretty good. Few models get this reliably right. The top OpenAI thinking models, O1 Pro, get it too, but all of DeepSeek R1, Gemini 2.0 Flash Thinking, and Claude do not. It did not solve his emoji mystery question, where he gave it a smiling face with an attached message hidden inside Unicode variation selectors, even when I gave it a strong hint on how to decode it in the form of Rust code. This is like I don't know if I could solve that, Andre. I'm sorry. That is a very complicated eval. But it makes sense, I guess, and probably valuable. It should break that eventually. The most progress I've seen from this is DeepSeek R1, which once partially decoded the message. It solved a few tic-tac-toe boards. He gave it with nice, clean chain of thought. I uploaded the GPT-2 paper. I asked it a bunch of simple lookup questions. All worked great. And so he has a whole bunch of evals that he can kind of rip through. And I think that's a really cool way to do it. It's like, do some web programming, build a website, like solve tic-tac-toe, decode this mystery, do this riddle. And then he also
do that in
asks,
about an hour, I'm assuming.
What? Yeah, exactly. He said he played with it for like 2 hours. And so he did the same thing with Deep Search. He asked, what's with the upcoming Apple launch? Any rumors? And he liked the answer there. Why is Palantir stock surging recently? recently. He gave it a
Yeah.
check. White Lotus season 3, where was it filmed, and is it the same team as seasons 1 and 2? What toothpaste does Brian Johnson use? It didn't get Singles Inferno season 4 cast, and where are they now? Which I don't even know what Inferno is, but Singles Inferno, I guess that's a show he watches, which I love. And then what speech to text program has Simon Wilson mentioned he's using? So he says, I did find some sharp edges here. The model doesn't seem to like to reference X as a source by default. Interesting. Though you can explicitly ask it to. A few times I caught it hallucinating URLs that don't exist. A few times it said factual things that I think are incorrect, and it didn't provide a citation. It told me Kim Jong-soo is still dating Kim Min-sool of Singles Inferno season 4, which surely is totally off, right? This is hilarious. Andre, are you into Singles Inferno? I need to get up on this. This is good stuff. The impression I get of deep search is that it's approximately around where Perplexity Deep Research offering, which is great, but not yet at the level of deep research. Random LLM gotchas. Sadly, the model's sense of humor does not seem to be obviously improved. This is a common LLM issue with humor capability and general mode collapse. Famously, 90% of the 1,000 outputs asking ChatGPT for a joke were repetitions of the same 25 jokes.
Crazy.
Got him dead to rights. GPT-5, you're on notice. You better be funny. Even when prompted in more detail, away from simple pun territory, example, give me a stand-up. I'm not sure that it is state-of-the-art humor, example, generated joke. Why did the chicken join a band? Because it had the drumsticks and wanted to be a cluck star.
That's a real knee slapper.
They're honestly, the jokes that are from LLMs are so bad that sometimes they're very funny, because it's just like, wow, like if somebody,
it will be amazing to when they do get to the point, because I think everybody can see that we will, the general belief is that we'll get there.
Yeah.
But like, think about having a comedian in your pocket that knows what you think is funny, and it's basically, somebody will make a rapper app that's just a big button the laugh button that you press, and it just generates a new joke. And it just gets better and better, and it even hears your response to it, so it starts to learn on
what you laugh. That would be really good training data, actually. Yeah, they could do that. Okay, so let's move on to GROK 3 and OpenAI deep research. I got your analysis there. So I went to both GROK 3 and OpenAI deep research, and I asked it this really, really long prompt. I said, I'd like you to build me a definitive table of LLM models and break down their evolution, specifically their relative sizes. So I want to know, GROK 3 came out, it uses 20K GPUs. I'm not exactly sure how many flops that is, but I would like to put all of these in the same terms, like they're all an equivalent number of flops. I want to know the progression of GPT-1 to 2 to 3 to 4 for the pre-training runs. And then I want to know the same thing that happened I said Anthropic. It was transcribed incorrectly to Anthropic, which is wrong. And I want dates of when these were released. Then give me some uniform benchmark like Chatbot Arena or MMLU. I really need you to go pull all this together. I'm like, come on, do this for me, bro. And then I'd like you to investigate how the bitter lesson and Moore's law are interacting right now. Essentially, the bitter lesson states that you always just want to throw more scale, but it's unclear to me what the benefits of scale are proportional to the capabilities of these models. So my basic thesis is that, we're potentially hitting diminishing marginal returns. We're going to see less gains from increased scale. And so the real question is, GROK 3 is a 20K GPU run. They're planning to do a 100K GPU run. And the question is, does the 5X or 10X increase in compute power, does that increase the model's final capability usefulness by 1%, 10%? Does it double it? Does it 10x it? And that's what I'm trying to predict. And I want to see these based on trend lines. What kind of results should I expect? And specifically, I want you to not just quantitative results, but qualitative results. Like, what do we expect a 1 million GPU cluster trained model to be able to do? Is it just high IQ? Is that the best measure? Like, how should we be measuring these things? And is there an evolution that, like, we have no top, no max. Do we just continue to push on? The final question is like, does this continue to get better as we get to 1 billion GPUs, 1 trillion GPUs, a Google GPUs? What are we getting for that? I guess the question is intelligence unlimited? Even if we assume that we're on the right algorithmic path, that's the main question. And so basically I just wanted to dump out a ton of research and give me a bunch
The only thing that could handle that kind of prompt is your secretary, right?
It's a lot of stuff.
I mean, you just basically dumped,
Yeah.
but you certainly
And
gave
so
it plenty to work with.
what's interesting is if you look at page 2 and then page like 6 or something, you can actually see both Grok and OpenAI dumped out tables of of how these models evolved. So GPT-1, it claims was trained on 10 GPUs, then GPT-2, 100 GPUs, GPT-3, 10,000 GPUs, and then GPT-4, 25,000 GPUs.
Which is what tracks to the other.
And on the other one, it says 1,000 and then 20K. And so the big question here is on flops. This is the real like standard metric is number of flops, and the jargon term for this is just using the order of magnitude for number of flops. So you can think of GPT-3, you call that an E23 model because it had 3.14 times 10 to the 23rd flops. And so you call that an E23 model. GPT-4 was an E25 model because it's not just more GPUs, but it's also more training time and more powerful GPUs. And so you can't just say, oh, they used 5x GPUs because they might have run them longer, more power, all these different things. So you really just want to do flops, because that's the most standard. And so DeepMind Chinchilla is an E23 model, Llama 70B is an E24 model, and Grok 3 is an E26 model. And
I don't know how I missed Chinchilla.
Oh, Chinchilla is a big one because that was the paper that that defined the scaling laws. So
interesting.
When people talk about the pre-training scaling law, they call it Chinchilla scaling laws because it came from the Chinchilla paper.
Got it.
And so in here, now this is where we get weird because ChatGPT claims that Grok 3 is an E26 model, but Grok 3 claims that Grok 3 is an E25 model. And so I don't know who's hallucinating here. I don't know who's more accurate.
They could both be hallucinating, to be clear.
They could.
No one is necessarily right.
And so Grok 3 claims that Grok 3 is less flop intensive than GPT-4. But GPT-4 claims that Grok 3 is more powerful than GPT-4. And so they're both gassing each other up, I guess, in a weird way. I think OpenAI is more accurate here, but it's very funny. I don't know. It's all very odd. And like I don't have time to fact check all of this, so I'm kind of just like vibe interpreting this. But let's read some of the analysis here from the bitter lesson. The bitter lesson argues that AI progress relies, and this is from Grok 3, and then we'll read the ChatGPT version. The bitter lesson argues that AI relies on scaling compute and data over bespoke algorithms. LLMs embody this. GPT-3's success came from brute force scale, not architectural breakthroughs. It was a very simple algorithm. They just gave it the entire web, and they trained it a lot with a lot of GPUs. This is the first like big training run, basically. However, your thesis about diminishing returns challenges this. Does more compute always yield proportional gains? Moore's law has slowed. That's the law that says that doubling transistor density every 2 years, with GPU performance now scaling via parallelism. And so we are scaling compute, but we're doing it by just getting more and more GPUs.
Yep.
LLM training outpaces hardware gains, relying on cluster size rather than per chip efficiency. So we're not just doubling the training run every year. We're like 10xing it because we're just building these monster data centers. So scaling laws, Kaplan and Hoffman show performance scales predictably with compute, parameters, and data. This implies a 10x compute increase yields 25 to 60% loss reduction, not 10x. MMLU gains reflect this. GPT-3 to GPT-4 is a 160x compute jump for a 50% score increase. I still don't really know how to interpret all this.
We're going to have some guests on to break it down.
Yeah. And so, I don't know. It's interesting. The main thing is that like, I think when most people play with this, they're like, it's great, it's good, but it's not like a complete step change from what else I'm seeing online.
No, the big headline takeaway from last night is that XAI is catching up on raw model capabilities in a very short period of time.
Yeah.
In terms of product usefulness, it doesn't seem to be there yet, right? Because even you're seeing, okay, well, you trained on all of my posts, but I actually don't even necessarily like that that much. And so they seem to be on a collision course with OpenAI from a capabilities standpoint, especially as they get into these, next runs.
Yeah.
But again, this is going back to my earlier point. I look at all this, Elon, hitting these evals, but then simultaneously still wanting to spend $100 billion on OpenAI when he could just, spend that money on XAI. And he's, again, we don't know if he's doing it to throw a wrench in the process, but it seems like he would love to be chairman of OpenAI is like my read of the situation.
Yeah. This is interesting. The ChatGPT deep research is, I think, much more readable as just as a research paper. So,
and again, that's them innovating at the product level.
Yeah.
And what Ben Thompson said is he's not sure if they just have a better model that's just producing better outputs, or they just are refining the actual product layer more.
Yeah. So they say increasing model size and compute generally improves performance, but with diminishing returns. And so that's the real question here of if we 100x the models like we're planning to, if it just gets a little bit better, it might not actually be able to do real work still, because it might still break down and hallucinate a little bit. Like we're all hoping for the model that just like never hallucinates ever and can do a ton of stuff and hold everything in memory, and
which may not ever come.
Maybe I think we will get there. It's just the question of like, what if it's 1,000 order of magnitudes? Like, like that would be, yes, the scaling law would hold, like the scaling law would be correct, but like it would take a long time to build like a Dyson sphere for that, basically. Early work by OpenAI showed that large language model loss follows a power law. Performance improves predictably as model parameters and data scale up. And this was that picture of like GPT-3 to GPT-4, more parameters, more data. And so everyone was going bigger, bigger, bigger. For example, going from GPT-3, 175 billion, to models like Gopher, 280, and Megatron Turing, 530, improved benchmarks, but not proportionally to the huge jump in compute required. DeepMind's 280B Gopher outperformed GPT-3 on knowledge tasks, reading comprehension and fact-checking, yet it saw little gain in logical thinking or common sense tasks despite 60% more compute. This suggests some capabilities plateau unless new approaches are used, and that's the reasoning model, right? And so diminishing returns are evident on many benchmarks. As models grow, metrics like MMLU, a broad knowledge test, improve, but approach an asymptote near human performance. And that's frustrating. Because I would want linear progress that just blows through human performance, but it's really like we're kind of, maybe we need new evals. I don't know. GPT-3 achieved only around 50% on MMLU, while below the 90% expert human level. So that's the human level benchmark. Gopher did 60%. Chinchilla did 67%. GPT-4 jumped to 86%, nearing human experts. However, GPT-4's training used roughly 2 orders of magnitude more compute than GPT-3 for that last 30 to 40 point gain. So it's still very important, but it's just like, diminishing. Each additional few points towards 90% is increasingly expensive in compute. Similarly, coding and math benchmarks saw massive leaps from GPT-3 to GPT-4, but further gains beyond GPT-4 are smaller. In XAI's GROK 3, pushing to an unprecedented 200K GPU cluster only yielded moderate improvements over the prior state-of-the-art. Hallucination. Yeah. They didn't use all 200K GPUs, and here it's saying that they did.
If you look in the
they
OpenAI specifically says in their research that they say up to 200,000 NVIDIA GPUs, 100 to 200K GPUs over 4 months, but we know that's not true.
Yeah, and so it's a mess. I don't know. We're close to something. It's cool. I like it, but
we've compared.
We got to step these up.
We've compared their models. Should we talk about their dynamic?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on to the Wall Street Journal. The inside story of how Altman and Musk went from friends to bitter enemies. Kick us off.
On the first full day of the second Trump presidency, Elon Musk was in the White House complex when he got word that his nemesis was about to hold a press conference with the president.
So
amazing first sentence here. I don't know who's writing this. He turned on the television and watched as OpenAI's chief executive Sam Altman and a beaming Donald Trump touted a $500 billion investment in AI infrastructure called Stargate. And this is a hilarious dynamic if it's actually true, where he's turning on the TV. Yeah. He's got X open on his phone. He's just shaking his head. Like, one, Sam is an absolute dog for even making this happen. Like, you got to be pretty brave to just go into the White House, the lion's den. Elon's got like 6 of his kids running around. They know you're a target.
That's great.
So props to even making that happen. Massa, I'm sure, was making some magic happen too. So despite having rarely left the president's side over the preceding few months, Musk was blindsided by the announcement, according to people familiar with the matter. Musk fumed to aides and allies about the announcement, claiming Stargate's backers didn't have the money they needed. The deepest, which is true, right?
Yeah.
It sort of came out that they didn't have it. It was more of like a roadshow, SPAC announcement type thing. So the deepest cut was Altman's success navigating Trump world via a carefully coordinated series of recent meetings in Palm Beach and phone calls with the White House, while keeping the plan secret from the president's first buddy.
Buddy. Oh, yeah, buddy cop. They're going buddy cop mode.
Buddy cop mode.
But Trump's got a lot of buddies.
Altman and Musk co-founded OpenAI in 2015, but their relationship soured when Musk left in 2018 following a power struggle. It worsened when Musk responded to the launch of ChatGPT by launching his own rival startup, XAI. This week, the feud went nuclear when Musk followed the Stargate unveiling with his own bombshell, a hostile $97.4 billion bid for the assets of the nonprofit that controls OpenAI. A decade after joining forces, they are now fighting for control of the very thing that brought them together in one of the highest stakes and most personal fights in recent business history. The outcome could determine everything from the future of a world-changing technology to who will help set the nation's technology agenda with the new president.
Interesting.
This article is based on the conversations with more than a dozen people familiar with Altman and Musk's relationship over the years, as well as OpenAI and Musk's business and political decisions.
Yeah. We got to go back and watch the Sam Altman, Elon Musk podcast. Have you seen this?
They had their own show together?
It wasn't. It was Y Combinator had a series of interviews on their YouTube channel, and Sam went and conducted a number of interviews, and one of them was with Elon. And so they're sitting in the Tesla factory, just chopping it up about like entrepreneurship and wisdom, and it's just like, it's crazy to see. I'll continue. So in many ways, Sam Altman, 39, and Elon Musk, 53, couldn't be more different. While Musk was beaten up and verbally abused as a child, Altman was a teacher's pet whose parents routinely told him he could be whatever he wanted to be. Where Musk was often abrasive, Altman tended to tell people what they wanted to hear. And while Musk was an engineer, steeping himself in the details of rocket and battery design, Altman is a technology-obsessed intellectual, reading widely across philosophy, science, and literature, and penning essays on how society should organize itself. But both have strikingly similar taste for power. Let's go.
Taste for power. That should be one of our hiring metrics.
Yes.
John, what do you think this guy's taste for power is? You think he's real hungry?
Yeah. I mean, if you're in an interview,
you can tell Ben's got a real taste for power. You know?
Absolutely. Yeah. If you're in an interview and somebody asks you, where do you want to be in 10 years? And you just say supremely powerful, I think you get the job. Oh yeah. Yeah. That's the video. Look at this. Very poorly shot.
That doesn't even feel that long ago.
It wasn't that long ago. The cinematography was not incredible, but I think it's probably
Elon's
2016
doing
or something.
The Andrew Tate, early
2015.
Signaling.
Wow. Yeah. That is wild seeing them hang out. Just bros, just guys being dudes, doing a pod together. You'd love to see it. It's too bad. I mean, they keep coming back to the fact that mom and dad are fighting. These are two, everyone picks a side, but ultimately these are Americans. They're building technology. I love technology. I love America. And I wish they could just be on the same team and build something awesome together. I hope that they can have a reconciliation. That's my biggest hope. And so for years, the millennial Altman looked up to the Gen-esque Musk as a hero, a real-life Tony Stark who provided a counterexample to the country's technological stagnation that Altman railed against when he was president of the startup accelerator Y Combinator. Altman met Musk years earlier when Y Combinator partner Jeff Ralston introduced them. Oh, I know Ralston pretty well. Oh, they misspelled his name here. And helped arrange for Altman to tour Musk's SpaceX rocket factory. Interesting. Altman's time leading Y Combinator from 2014 to 2019 put him at the epicenter of power in Silicon Valley. He became known as a fixer with an unrivaled Rolodex who could call in favors for the startups he invested in or punish investors who crossed them. And this is 100% true. He was great at what he did during this time. He was fantastic. His special talent was raising money, which he would do by arriving in his signature uniform of jeans and sneakers, curl his small frame up cross-legged in a conference room chair, and unspool a vision so grandiose, compelling, and earnest that it often seemed like investors were powerless to keep from funding his projects. It's great. I mean, great storyteller, great fundraiser. And what's interesting is that, he raised some money. He raised a lot of money for his projects, but he was also like an angel investor who got tons of deals done for other people. He set other people up with funds. Like he was marshaling capital all over the place.
I had heard that he was able to invest in Stripe at a $700,000 valuation.
I don't know, but I know
it was like 10 on 700K or something.
I mean, I think he's a billionaire just from Stripe.
Yeah,
basically somehow. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I mean, phenomenal investor. And then
so anyways,
also just
for anyone listening, if you want to be a billionaire, just put 10K into the next Stripe.
That's a good advert.
People tend to make it really
why are you overcomplicating it? Yeah.
Think, it takes years and all this stuff, all this hard work. No, just take 10 grand and just put it into the next Stripe.
Yeah. And I mean, he's even doing it more recently with Oklo, that nuclear startup,
which is public.
And it's a SPAC, and it's a successful SPAC. The stock's way up. What a narrative valuation.
If you see people talking about it, on X, the company, they call it Sam Altman's nuclear startup.
Yeah.
So that is probably the dominant narrative causing it to pump.
Yeah.
I actually have to check. I own a little bit of it.
You own Oklo? Okay, not financial advice here, but we are going to check the stock on public.
Yeah, I am down 4% today. So
it's pulling back.
It had to.
Well,
it had to.
Make up your own mind. Go on public, check it out, and see if it's for you.
Yeah,
maybe. Anyway,
not that we certainly do not recommend.
No, we don't recommend individual stocks, but we do recommend becoming a multi-strategy, multi-stage, large asset management firm.
Yeah.
And running your business through public.
Yeah.
Become a long-short equity hedge fund.
There you go.
And it all starts with public. In early 2015, Musk and Altman began having regular dinners each Wednesday in the Bay Area. Their conversations tended toward the apocalyptic, how the world might end, how they might prepare for it, to where they might have to flee. A likely cause, they agreed, would be artificial intelligence that grows smarter than humans and impossible to control. That May, Altman suggested they create a Manhattan Project to develop artificial general intelligence, or AGI, that is as smart as humans at most tasks. They wanted to ensure Google, which had a huge lead in developing the technology, didn't end up deciding what it would mean for the human race. Such a fascinating solution, there is another world where you're we're just going to try and use military might to just actually ban this development of this technology.
Yeah.
You could do that. I wouldn't advocate for that at all. And I think AGI is I think the whole history of this stuff is going very well. I'm very satisfied with how it's going. But there is another world where you're there's this technology and we need to, steer people away from development of this and ban this and control this, and then have international coalitions and military might to build it up. There are things you can't build. Dark web drug marketplaces are a good example.
It's worth noting that Sam Altman and Musk had these meetings, and then Altman decided that he was going to get really into building bunkers, sort of doomsday, setups.
Be a fly on the wall.
So I would love to have been a part of those conversations.
And so they joined forces. They raised up to $1 billion. Musk pledged to supply the lion's share of the money, and they would lead it as co-chairman. Ooh. the co-CEO thing is always
Co-chairman
rough.
is hilarious.
Yeah, they should have figured that out early on. It's very clear that they didn't play out like, okay, like what if this is actually like $1 trillion opportunity? Like who will want to run this? And they were both like, well, obviously it'll be me. It's not. There's no question. Of
course.
Their relationship began to disintegrate in 2017 pretty quickly. I mean, this is 2015. They're having dinners. 2017 they start disintegrating after OpenAI researchers realized they would need far more money than a nonprofit could raise to develop advanced AGI. We talked about this, how if you want to summon the AI god in a box, you got to be a capitalist. It's not happening at a nonprofit. You're not just writing some clever algorithm with some altruistic
Although
researcher.
we are interested in taking PETA private.
Exactly.
There's a lot of
private. No, it's the for-profit conversion.
For-profit conversion.
For-profit conversion. Then it'll be private, and then we'll take it public, and then we'll probably take it private again. As the private equity guys
Bravo will take it public,
Exactly.
take it private.
Yep. You know the post I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It's great. According to one of their emails, Elon demanded majority control and to be CEO. Altman's successful move to block his mentor would mark the beginning of their rupture. He convinced another co-founder, Greg Brockman, to back him over Musk. Brockman reeled in OpenAI chief scientist Ilya Sutskever to also back Altman. Brockman and Sutskever wrote in an email to Musk that since OpenAI was founded to avoid an AI dictatorship, it seemed like a bad idea to create a structure where you would become a dictator if you chose to. Within hours, Musk wrote back that this is the final straw. By early 2018, he had left the company and Altman took over leadership. This was like very under-discussed at the time because OpenAI was such just a research lab and they were doing like little things here and there. This was definitely not in the news in the same way. Like 2018, people were talking about SpaceX and Tesla mostly.
Yeah.
Over the next few years, they focused on research. In 2022, they released ChatGPT. This became huge. Turned out to be one of the most successful and transformative consumer technology products of the century in the company of the iPhone, Facebook, and TikTok. As shocked as the rest of the world that AI had gone mainstream and upset that he wasn't a part of it, Musk began publicly criticizing OpenAI for moving too fast and not taking safety seriously. He signed an open letter calling for a 6-month pause on AI development. Within a few months, launched.
It's funny. A lot of people called for signed similar letters calling for a pause on new podcast formation.
Oh yeah,
and of course that didn't get through.
Nope, you can't stop it. The arrow of progress moves in but one way.
Yeah.
In 2024, he attacked Altman in a new venue, court, after suing OpenAI and its CEO that February. He withdrew the suit in June, refiled it in August, and amended it in November. They've been going back and forth in the courts for a long time. Musk's lawyers declared the perfidy and deceit are of Shakespearean proportions. You know it's a good lawyer.
You got to pay top dollar for a lawyer that can hit.
That's
you
not less than $1,000 an hour. That's a $5,000 an hour lawyer.
That's $10K potentially.
Yeah. Altman and Musk were bitter.
LLM could never.
Yeah, and so Altman said Musk was bitter that he left before the company succeeded. As Musk's legal attacks escalated, Altman watched with growing alarm as Musk grew closer and closer to Donald Trump, campaigning by his side and spending hundreds of millions of dollars to support him. You want to continue?
Yeah, and I mean, there's lines from Altman interviews where he's like, I would hope that, the president wouldn't sort of pick favorites when we're here, all trying to develop this transformative technology. And to Trump's credit, he seemingly hasn't picked favorites specifically within AI, right?
Yeah.
He obviously has a good relationship with Elon, but he's not, we haven't seen him go out and do any sort of press conference for XAI or the Memphis, data center.
It's such a narrative violation.
Yeah.
Like everyone thinks Trump is going to be super corrupt with this stuff. And he's just like, you know what?
He's having his cash bonanza over here. Our listeners know that he's
deal guy.
Deal guy.
Anyway, Altman first mentioned Stargate to OpenAI's board in 2023 as a way to vastly increase the computing power his company could tap to develop and operate AI. He originally brought the idea to Microsoft, asking it to invest upward of $100 billion. But in the wake of an episode in 2023, when Altman was ousted from the CEO perch for 5 days, the tech giant balked. Says, get it together, guys. We're not putting up $100 billion for a guy who can't hold on to his job. He gets upset. It's so funny. Like there's so much drama here. Altman soon found partners. One was SoftBank. Altman had known him since his Y Combinator days. Second was Larry Ellison, longtime friend of Musk, who was hung out to dry when xAI pulled out of a Texas data center project that Ellison's company Oracle was working on. Altman agreed OpenAI would take it over. The project grew into the foundation for Stargate. I didn't know that.
Interesting.
That it had originally been an xAI project, but then I guess Musk wanted to do the data center like himself and like own the whole stack.
And isn't Ellison heavily invested in X?
I don't know. Yeah, I think so. I mean, they're all super conflicted and like, it's all just like
not
snaking his tail over here.
Yeah, so I think he put in at least $1 billion.
Okay, look that up and I'm going to keep reading. In December, Masayoshi Son played golf with the president-elect at Mar-a-Lago and announced his intention to invest $100 billion in U.S. infrastructure projects alongside Trump and Lutnick. Their press conference effectively previewed Stargate without making any of the details public, which ensured Musk still didn't know about OpenAI's involvement.
Here's a great AI overview, a Gemini overview.
Okay.
Quoting, using the Washington Post as a source. Larry Ellison, co-founder of Oracle, invested $1 billion in X. However, as of September 2024, he lost $720 million of his investment, according to the Washington Post, which clearly he didn't lose his investment.
He had a paper loss.
He had a paper,
and then it went back up,
down,
maybe, and it hasn't been
back
marked.
Up.
Yeah,
so
very odd.
Gonna have to put the Washington Post in the true zone.
And so Altman goes to the inauguration festivities. He doesn't sit with the other tech CEOs alongside Musk. There was like the high, the real like killers were up there with like Zuck and Bezos, and Musk were up in like kind of a balcony area, and then Altman was down with Theo Vaughn and Alex Wang.
Yeah,
it was a bunch of cool like little micro crews. I think Jake Paul was over there for some reason. The next day, Altman and his partners arrived at the White House, where they were more fully explained their plans for Stargate to Trump. Trump told the group he wanted to go ahead with the announcement. The new president loved that they were aiming to invest $500 billion during his term, a number sure to make headlines. And it makes sense. He wants a lot of jobs, wants a lot of economic growth, spend the money in America. And so Musk gets upset. He's fuming to aides about how the partners didn't really have the funding lined up for the project. He called it fake on X. Musk was already plotting a counter move and had been considering making a bid for the nonprofit. Musk said he was inspired to make the bid because OpenAI was in the midst of becoming a for-profit company, and he believed Altman planned to undervalue the asset of the nonprofit, which would become an independent charity with a stake in the for-profit. But Musk's more primal message was for investors. Let's go to war with Sam Altman. Altman was at the Paris AI Summit when news of the bid broke, and so he got like TMZ'd a little bit with the reporter saying, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And he's like, "Oh my god, I can't deal with this."
Basically, was saying like, I just want him to stop really bad. That was the immediate take.
And so he said, "OpenAI is not for sale, and the board has unanimously rejected Mr. Musk's latest attempt to disrupt his competition," said Brett Taylor, chairman of OpenAI's board. I thought Brett Taylor's building an AI company separately. I guess he is. I think he's probably doing both. Any potential reorganization of OpenAI will strengthen our nonprofit and its mission to ensure AGI benefits all of humanity. OpenAI's rejection comes as no surprise, says Musk's lawyer, Mark Toberoff. Musk had said he wanted to save the company from the dangerous direction in which his co-founder had taken it. It's time for OpenAI to return to the open source, safety-focused force for good it once was, he pronounced. We will make sure that happens. Altman responded in his signature brand of nice guy savagery. Probably his whole life is from a position of insecurity, he said on Bloomberg TV. I feel for the guy. I don't think he's a happy person. I do feel for him. Wow.
It's wild because I think if Elon would tell you, I don't want to be happy.
Yeah,
so
he
don't
said
use
that
don't use
Rogan.
that metric to evaluate, like to try to judge me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
His motivation is to put a data center on Mars.
Yeah, that's true. Anyway.